Hey everyone, it's Mattea of the Sierra Club Grand Canyon chapter, aka the Arizona chapter. I am our Grand Canyon program manager, and I'm based out of the unceded homelands of over 13 tribal nations in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I'm so excited to welcome you to Land Defenders, a podcast dedicated to the voices, stories, and wisdom rooted in the lands of the greater Grand Canyon region. Here, on land sacred to many indigenous peoples, each stone, river, mountain, and canyon wall holds stories of connection, reverence, and defense. In each episode, we challenge the forces threatening this living ecosystem and elevate the stories of those defending its future. From activists and elders to water protectors and land defenders, we're here to share the truth, confront injustice, and explore the deep-rooted connections that tie culture to conservation. Join us as we move beyond the rim and into the heart of the work to protect this region. Up next, you're about to listen to an episode in a mini-series that we developed in partnership with 3 students from NAU, focused on Snowbowl Ski Resort and the agencies that are supposed to hold them accountable. First, off to the students to introduce themselves and their project, and then off to our interview with Shawn Mulford. Note that this is the first episode in a 2-part episode with Shawn.
Hello, I'm Emma.
I'm Soleil.
And I'm Bianca. We are 3 students from Northern Arizona University studying sustainable communities. Environmental justice is at the heart of each of our studies, and we see it as a key aspect of building healthy, sustainable communities. That's why we partnered with the Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter to develop a project for our community engagement fieldwork.
For this project, we wanted to focus on an issue that is local to Flagstaff, something that is significant that many people might not be fully aware of. We decided a podcast mini-series would be a great way to make this topic accessible to the community, especially since we could hear directly from people who have been deeply involved in this issue for years, if not decades.
The focus of our series is the Snowbowl Ski Resort, which is located on what's known in colonial terms as the San Francisco Peaks, just north of Flagstaff. These peaks are sacred to over 13 tribal nations and are a living cultural site.
Yet Snowbowl, along with the agencies tasked with regulating it, have failed to maintain a respectful, consensual relationship with the tribal nations and have failed to be a steward of the land, causing detrimental environmental and cultural impacts.
We hope this podcast can be a lasting resource for our community to become more informed about Snowbowl Mountain Resort and its impact on these sacred lands.
Thank you for listening.
To just give us a bit more of an intro of yourself and maybe explore a little bit of what your relationship to this fight is and why it matters to you and has always mattered to you.
Thank you. Shawn Mulford Unisha. Tkatna Sahni Inshla. Mai Dash Gijni Bushes Chin. Ashchi Dash Che. Totsotni Edat Chanella. Thank you for that. And you know, in our way as Diné people, we always give our 4 clans to have everyone understand how we're related to each other and to the creation. And so your question was about holding the forestry accountable.
And I do want to note that we refer to the Forest Service as the forestry throughout this podcast, but we are referring to the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service.
And the word fight was in that question. And, you know, I think that we have to remember that we're dealing with a holy place, a holy mountain, and we can't fight with that, and we can't fight one another. You know, we're all, they say human beings, bala'ishla'i, the 5-finger ones. You know, we're all related. We all come from the same root as humans, and we have that relation to each other, and we shouldn't be fighting one another. And when it comes to sacredness, you know, this holy place, there should be no fighting. You know, we can, as the elders have said, we are defending our way of life, but we're not here to fight. But we will stand up and defend our way of life. the way the Creator gave us.
Do you want to say a little bit more about like how that defending has looked? Because I think that sounds really worthwhile.
Well, I went to Loyola Law University, and they invited me there, and it was a group of young human rights attorneys, and they're not attorneys, but they were students to become human rights attorneys, and the question that was asked by that group was, the work that I've done, what advice would I have for these young students in this type of work? Because they're going out and they're going to defend the rights of people all over the world. Is there anything that I can relay to them? And I think for me, how I answered that question is I said, you have to know who you're dealing with. If you're going to go and be a human rights attorney, who are you dealing with? And I think that was my mistake here with the forestry and with Snowbowl and even with the federally recognized tribes. When this issue first came out and we went to the forestry, and I think it was Nora Rasher, that was the forest supervisor at that time, I was naive. I thought, hey, we'll tell her about culture and how this is impacting our culture, how reclaimed wastewater would impact our culture. And so we went there and we met with her and, basically explained some things culturally, and they just kept going. They said, oh, well, we're going to keep going. And then, I thought, okay, well, obviously the forestry is not really caring about our culture. How about human health? Mm-hmm. So then we brought in the endocrine disruptors, the pharmaceuticals, the personal care products, all of these things. They call it viable but non-cultural bacteria, so forth, and talked about it from the ingestion portion. The one thing from the human health standpoint is the DNA survives the waste treatment facility and survives that process. And so when the water is being sprayed on the mountain, it's not as though the virus and the bacteria have disappeared. In fact, I went to the World Health Organization, one of their leading experts, and her name was Joan B. Rose. And she said, Shawn, just think of it like a toy. If you got a toy with a battery in it, it's blinking and it's doing all this stuff. But if you take the battery out, it no longer ceases to work. And she said that's exactly what's going on with the reclaimed wastewater, is that the virus or the bacteria has been not dormant during the process, but it didn't disappear, just like the car didn't disappear or the toy didn't disappear. It's just what it's scientifically called viable but non-culturable. So meaning you can put it on a petri dish, it's not going to go, but it's still viable. And that's the human health aspect that we started to bring out. We brought into the discussion of metagenomic testing rather than just indicator testing, all kinds of stuff. And of course the forestry just kind of looked the other way and kept going. And I was thinking, okay, we've talked about culture, we've talked about health. Now let's talk about the environment. Maybe they care about the environment because that is their mandate. And when we begin to talk about nutrient loading and the reclaimed wastewater having such high nutrient, nitrogen and phosphorus and salts in it, that it would alter the soil composition on the mountain, which would promote invasive species to outcompete native species, which are our medicine plants. So we brought that up, talked about it from an environmental standpoint, and the forestry just kept going. And of course they allowed it. And so as I'm sitting talking with the these young attorneys, I said, I didn't know who I was dealing with. I was expecting a human response from something that wasn't human. And that was my mistake. A corporation is not a human being. A government entity is not a human being. A municipal entity, Flagstaff, the city, is not a human being. Federally recognized tribes are not human beings. And so I was expecting a human response from something that wasn't human. I was looking for compassion, understanding, respect, and common sense. And none of that occurred. And so you asked a question about how has that defending been going? Mm-hmm. And so we're dealing with something here that goes beyond the scope of what most people think about. We're dealing with something that isn't a human. And that's how we understand it.
I would love to go off of that and maybe just go into a brief timeline of the attack of this mountain since colonization. Like, what has that looked like over the past, 200 years or 150 years? And since Snowbowl and the forestry have been, in quote, management of the mountain, because Snowbowl was established in, 34? And what has this defense of the peaks looked like over time? Because the reclaimed wastewater is newer over the past 2 decades, right? But obviously there's been pushback against these Snowbowl for decades. Is that right?
That's right. Well, when we look at the creation, the way the Creator created the creation, the elders say, if you ever want to know what your Creator looks like, you only have to look at your own body. And so when we begin to look at